Sheldon Keefe shaking up the lines at practice today ahead of their matchup against the Florida Panthers. We'll break it all down on today's edition of the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day.
You're Locked On Maple Leafs, your daily podcast on the Toronto Maple Leafs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome into the Locked On Leafs podcast, a daily Maple Leaf-centric podcast hosted by myself, Mike DiStefano, and my co-host, Dave Morassutti. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. What's going on, Dave? How you been today?
Good. I don't have as much exciting stuff to announce like you do, mister. I got a bunch of announcements to make.
Man,
last week.
Yeah, like last week was the announcement of covers, so I'm writing for covers.com, doing some betting analysis with for Leaf games, and then today I got to announce today was a hectic day too, by the way, because there were some complications with the launch and with the announcement, but I'm going to be writing for the Hockey News now, and I think people who've listened to this podcast long enough are aware of my passion that I have for the hockey card hobby and whatnot. And I was contacted about 6 weeks to a month ago and asked if I had any interest in launching a site for the Hockey News about hockey card and memorabilia collecting. And I said, heck yeah, that's something I have a lot of interest in. And after 6 weeks, a discussion, and we finally launched today. And I'm excited to get going. Yeah, there's the announcement, the official announcement. If you're watching here on YouTube, the first post had to do, of course, with Connor Bedard. We decided to do it today, though, specifically because today was the release of like the flagship Series 1. And there was a lot of buzz about whether or not there was going to be a Bedard card in it. They knew that his like Young Guns wasn't going to be there, but people thought there could potentially be like an unannounced secret card. And there happened to be. So a lot of fanfare. And my first story was about that. And there's a quote from a store owner here in Toronto that talked about how crazy things got once the leak became was out there. And it was confirmed that there are Connor Bedard's first hockey card in a Blackhawks uniform was actually available in this set and could be pulled. So my story's up on the Hockey News now. You can read about it. But Dave, the Maple Leafs angle here is in the set. The top Young Guns chase is none other than Leafs' very own Matthews Knies. So that's going to be the hot chase card in terms of the rookies, the coveted Young Guns, Matthews Knies. So I've got a couple of boxes right beside me here, pal, and I'll be ripping into those as soon as we're done recording this podcast. So I'm excited. I'm hoping to pull a Matthews Knies.
Well, and it's funny because when you were talking about like all you went to the show in St. Catharines last week, and we had some like viewers. I think it was even James Orr from Offside Hockey Talk was like, "Yo, where are those Leafs Young Guns at?" Like,
yeah.
You're gonna be now the guy that everyone's gonna go to say we need our fix for some Leaf cards. Like I used to collect hockey cards back in the day too.
Yeah.
I keep telling you, I'm gonna find my binder. I have a binder full of stuff from like 05, 06.
I want to look through them, man. I want to look through them. That was a big year. That was the Crosby year. So you might have some Crosby or Ovechkin rookies lying around somewhere that are worth a couple $100 that you don't know about. It's possible. It's possible, buddy. Mm-hmm. So one day we'll find those cards and we'll take a look. We'll take a look through what you got there. But yeah, like I'm hoping we could bring some of that content here onto the show. Like, let us know down below if you're interested. We're not going to turn into a hockey card podcast, obviously. But, any time there's maybe some Leaf related stuff, or if I go to a show or whatever, if you guys want some of that content, I would be happy to bring it onto the show to discuss it. But I'll leave it up to the viewers if they want that. If those who do want that content, it will be available on the Hockey News. And, go follow me on Twitter. I'll be sharing it all the time at Mickey_Canuck. With that, Dave, let's get into today's show. because there was some interesting developments at Leafs practice on Wednesday. Sheldon Keefe shaking up the lines a little bit after a bit of a rocky game against the Chicago Blackhawks. Did this surprise you at all?
Uh, Not entirely, because we were looking at trends. I mean, the last episode was a little about trends that were popping up. And when trends start popping up with your team, you got to move things around, be willing to change things around to see if maybe a shakeup is needed to change the trend. Although it wasn't as big of a shakeup as maybe some would have expected, in terms of like lines being juggled around, because like it's just like changing moving parts.
Interesting you say that. I want to put a pin in that conversation right now. We'll have that after we take a look at the line and the changes that were made. And then I'm curious to hear what maybe you thought could have happened. So why don't we pull it up? We have the projected lines for tonight's game against the Panthers and the Leafs, and what we saw mainly at practice today. Noah Gregor technically was up with Matthews and Marner in practice because Bertuzzi had a maintenance day, but this is what's expected to be the lineup for the game against Florida. So for those who are listening, I'll explain what the lineup changes are. No change to the top line. Bertuzzi, Matthews, and Marner still a trio. They're in check. The middle six getting some adjustments here. Matthews Knies moving up to the second line with John Tavares and William Nylander. Max Domi moving down with Fraser Minten and Calle Jarnkrok. And then the fourth line expected to remain the same with Noah Gregor, David Kampf, and Ryan Reeves. And now we got some defensemen that are flipping partners, which I think is very welcomed, definitely on this side of the mic. I'll let you speak on it in a second as well. But Riley and Brody, they're remaining together. They've been fine. But McCabe and Klingberg have been separated, folks. We're going to roll with the lines that we saw in the third period of the game against Chicago, where things looked a little bit better, I suppose. Mark Giordano will be with Klingberg, and Jake McCabe is going to pair up with Timothy Liljegren. Why don't we start with the defense, and then we'll kind of move to the forwards afterwards. You like what you see here, Dave, with McCabe and Klingberg getting broken up here?
I think so. I mean, you're looking at, a unit that had their struggles, and I like that Sheldon Keefe is making that change, because, there's only so much you can do. You can only say you can work on certain things, but a coach has a feel, right, of when things need a shake up. And I don't think this is a change for making just for the sake of making change, because those first two periods against Chicago were quite poor. And in that third period, he's like, okay, I had enough. We need to make a change. And I'm glad that because sometimes Keefe will make these changes and he'll revert back to, good old faithful. But the problem is, this isn't good old faithful. He realized, I think, that he's got to give this a true shot, right? And against the Panthers, I talked about this in the last show, that when you're on the road, teams are now going to try to exploit a weakness. So that Klingberg-McCabe pairing, you throw that out there, here comes Tkachuk, Barkov, those guys that are going to try to feast on that matchup. So Sheldon Keefe, I think, is trying to guard against that a little bit here.
Yeah, and you could shelter one of those pairs, in the way that he feels necessary. Like, I would imagine we'll see Gio and Klingberg get more of the offensive zone faceoffs, where McCabe and Liljegren will probably get more of the D zone faceoffs, if we're splitting like those two up. But definitely, it gives Keefe an opportunity to split those guys up and still see what they can do. Because if you look at what's gone on at 5-on-5, I mean, it hasn't been good for that pairing. They've been playing the expected goals of 30%. They've been on the ice for 5 goals against together at 5-on-5 as well. And we're only through 3 games here, Dave. So it just wasn't working. The McCabe and Liljegren pairing, or McCabe and Klingberg pairing. So it's something that I think is something we wanted to happen, expected to happen. It doesn't mean that it can't get back together at some point. I just think Jake McCabe needs to find his game, because that's really the guy that I've looked at and haven't been happy with. So playing him with Liljegren, maybe in a lesser role, allow him to get that confidence back and allow him to kind of get back to doing the things that made him an attractive asset for the Maple Leafs at the deadline last year. So for me, I think it's a good call for Sheldon Keefe, and hopefully it works out.
I do too, right? It's not like they have a someone in the waiting in the wings to come and help this defense, right? They don't have someone to say, all right, let's plug this guy and he's going to make things all better. Or they're not, there's not somebody who's, I know some people say Connor Timmins is injured, but I don't think Connor Timmins is going to be the reason that this defense starts playing better defense. That's not his style.
Buddy, Connor McCarr Timmins, I don't know. Kale Timmins.
Ooh.
You never know, pal. You never know. No, I agree with you. He's he is what he is ultimately. He's not going to make a world of a difference for this blue line either. I would imagine. As for the forward group, we saw a flip in the top 6 that I don't think a lot of us were so much expecting to happen, at least not the one that did end up happen. It looks to be happening. Want to take a quick break. We'll come back. We'll get into the changes made within the top 6, and then we'll preview tonight's game, Leafs and Panthers, and get to our 3 keys to victory for Toronto. So we'll get into all that and more on the other side. But first, Dave, have a word from one of our show sponsors.
Yes, today's show is brought to you by eBay Motors, because passion, drive, and patience, what brings home the winning trophy, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers.
We'd also like to thank our friends at Game Time. You shouldn't have to worry when you're buying tickets to your next big event. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you, with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. Game Time is the only ticketing app that gives you the complete peace of mind with your purchase. See all the views from your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. All-in prices show up in your total up front, so you're not going to get hit with those hidden fees. Buy tickets in seconds with 2 taps. They're obsessed with giving you and finding ways to help you save money on tickets. Find exclusive flash deals and sponsored deals on tickets for football, baseball, hockey, whatever you're looking for. And with zone deals, you can pick the section, and Game Time picks the seats for an average of an 18% savings. And the Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Welcome back into the Locked On at Leafs podcast. It's Mike DiStefano and Dave Morassutti. We're a daily Maple Leaf-centric podcast, so you could subscribe to us wherever you get your podcast from. We're on each streaming podcast subscription, also up on YouTube. We would appreciate if you gave us a quick like on this video and a subscribe as well, as we've got new content coming out to you each and every day to keep you up to date on everything going on with your beloved Toronto Maple Leafs. And one of those things that is happening today is we're getting some lineup movement, some changes to the lines. We went over what happened with the D pairings, and now we're going to kind of dive a little bit into what's going on with the forward group. So, Dave, if you want to pull back up the line changes that we saw at practice on Wednesday, you'll notice, for those on YouTube, it's not Domi with Tavares and Nylander. It's Matthews Knies, the youngster. The guy who had his young guns released today that everyone's going to be chasing. He's now moved up to the second line. What are your thoughts on that move, Dave?
I think when I first saw the line of Knies, Minten, and Yarncroc, I didn't mind it because you give the young guns out there, give them in certain matchups, it could work out. But watching it, you could see that maybe a little too much to have two rookies who have a combined, well, just under 20 games. Let's go with 20 games of experience at the NHL level, even less than that, a chance to anchor their own line. Probably a little too much to ask right off the hop. And so I do like that you're splitting them up. You're getting Minten with two veteran guys who've played for so long. Domi can be more of a facilitator in this regard. I think Yarncroc and Minten could probably benefit from that a little bit. And with Knies, I think he needs to be in the top 6. Like most of our projections had him in the top 6 to start the season.
Yeah.
It's just that, I think Keefe liked that combination with him and with Knies and Minten that he wanted to try that. But I think Matthew Knies is truly a top 6 player, right? His efforts there. I know people have been hung up on him to start the year, but like I saw him a few times in person, and I know that this guy has a drive. He has the energy that really this team could really use, especially in the top 6. I think Nylander and Tavares will really benefit from having him with them.
Yeah, and I think they just need someone who's also like defensively responsible, and Knies has proven to be that. Yarncroc was there for a little bit, but maybe I think they just need a little bit more pop, right? Like that line, like Tavares and Nylander, as good as Nylander has looked, and he's looked great this season. They've still been outscored so far this year, so adding a little bit more of a defensively responsible player, although he's young. I'm not saying that this guy's the second coming of Mark Stone here, but he is, still responsible and can play a two-way game. I wonder too how much of this, and maybe this is tin hat theory, tin hat going on here, but how much of it you think has to do with the fact that they're playing the Florida Panthers? Do you recall what happened the last time Matthew Knies played the Florida Panthers?
I do recall, and I do recall being not very happy the last time Matthew Knies played against the Florida Panthers.
That's right. Sam Bennett took liberties on our guy in game 1 of the second round and unfortunately ended his season. He was out for the year with a concussion. We later found out, though, he would have been good to go if they would have been able to stretch it to a game 6. But I wonder how much that has to do with it, too, where they're like, Kniesy, this is a big game for you. You can, a revenge game almost because of what happened, what they did to you. Have an opportunity to play him up in the top 6 and maybe he can, pot a goal or two, against the Cats. What do you think? You think I'm onto something?
It could be. I mean, let's not forget that he made his debut in the Sunshine State last year.
That's right. That's right. He did.
It'll be a bit of a rebirth in a way after.
It was in Amelie, though, right? That's where he made his debut, and then they went to Florida afterwards. Yeah, you were there.
I was there.
You were there the day Matty Knies played for. You had to lay your eyes on Matty Knies in a Leaf uniform. So because of this change up, and we'll see what happens. I think it'll work out actually pretty well because they did look good in the playoffs when they were together. You've got Domi flipping down to the third line alongside Fraser Minten and Calle Yarncroc. I want to quickly have a conversation about Minten. Do you think that he's done anything to suggest that he's worthy of extending past that 9-game deadline? Like, what have been your impressions of Minten so far through 3 games?
I think it hasn't been terrible, but you also see where the NHL game is getting to him a little bit, where the speed of it, the strength of the opposing players is having an impact on him, right? Like, this was kind of what I was expecting. It gives him a chance to witness it and make adjustments, and the coaching staff can get a good gauge on what he needs to work with. But I still think that, this is a situation here where we're starting to see why he's, a 19-year-old, right? Why he's a young player, and why young players generally struggle to make that transition to the professional, to the NHL. That's why a lot of them, especially, he has the size, but it's how he uses that size, how he uses those, the talents and skills that he has. In the NHL, it's that much tougher, right? And teams don't want to look bad in front of rookies either, right? Opposing players want to show the rookie, you're a rookie, I'm a vet, know your place.
Right.
There hasn't been a lot of that with Fraser Minten, but there has been a little bit of that. There's been some moments. So I think it's good for him to experience it because he can learn from it, right? And the Leafs aren't in a situation where, oh no, he doesn't know, he might be struggling a little bit here, and they're worried. They shouldn't be worried because this is exactly what I think they were kind of expecting with this sort of situation.
Yeah, I mean, the reason why he's here is because he earned it. He earned an extended look, but again, this is why the 9 games is there, right? Like it's kind of a cushion for teams where they don't have to completely burn that first year of their contract. They can get a little bit of a look that's not, haphazard preseason games. It's the real deal. It's the real thing, and it's completely played at a different pace. How do they stack up and look once the real games start? And it's not that Minton has played poorly by any stretch, but I don't think that he hasn't been he hasn't shined at all. And you wouldn't expect anyone to playing third line minutes, only getting, 12, 13, 14 minutes in a game. But I think that this has been a good experience for him, and now he'll know exactly what he's got to work on when he goes back to junior, and hopefully come back next season and he's bigger and faster and stronger, makes the team out of camp again, and then this time stays for good and becomes a real solid contributor for this Maple Leafs lineup. But I think, as we all somewhat predicted a couple of weeks ago, he's probably going to go back. But again, great experience, that he can learn from for sure. All right, Dave. Why don't we take a break? One more. We'll come back. Let's reset and let's dig into tonight's game. Leafs and Panthers. Say it's a rematch of the second round of the playoffs. First time the Leafs got there in a long time, and they were quickly eliminated by these same Cats. So we'll tee up tonight's game and go through the 3 keys. But before we get into all that, let me tell you guys all about Sleeper. Matthews scores a hat trick. Leafs win the Stanley Cup. And if you want to win 100 times your money, play daily fantasy hockey on the Sleeper app. These are all possible scenarios for this season, but to have a chance at winning big, you need to play daily fantasy hockey on Sleeper. As the official daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL Network, Sleeper is our top choice for daily fantasy sports, especially daily fantasy hockey. With Sleeper, you can win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy hockey contests. With studs like Matthews, McDavid, Ovechkin, all you need to do is pick more or less on stats for these stars. Choose stats like goals, assists, saves, plus, minus, and more. You heard me, Leaf fans. 100 times payouts on Sleeper. So start paying attention and get your picks right so you can win big. Use the promo code LOCKEDONNHL and you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's Locked On NHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. Welcome back into the Locked On NHL, Locked On Leafs podcast. I did Locked On NHL podcast earlier today with Ross Levite. Go check that out, where we spoke about what's going on within the Eastern Conference. Talked about the slow start for the Washington Capitals, by the way. Not looking good for that club. But tonight we've got the Maple Leafs and the Florida Panthers, and it's a rivalry game, I would say, after what happened last spring when the Panthers eliminated the Maple Leafs 4-1. It was a short stay in the second round after waiting 20 years to get there. What are you expecting out of tonight's matchup, Dave?
I mean, this is not the same Florida Panthers team that we saw last year, right? They're really banged up. Like, if you look at the guys who are not going to be playing in this game, you're going to want, this is another one of those games where it's easy to underestimate your opponent, but it's also like this team is 1-2 out of the gate. They can score, although they didn't score in their first game. Like, they still got good players, but it's clearly a banged up team that you're going to be going up against, right? No Aaron Ekblad, no Brandon Montour, who are those are their best defensemen out, right?
Yeah. Sam Bennett's day-to-day too, which I think is interesting. I'll explain why in a second.
Convenient.
Yeah, you think it is convenient? You think Revo might be out there patrolling to maybe, get a little bit of revenge after what he did to old Matty Knies last year?
Well, I mean, if Radical Gudis was in the lineup if Radical Gudis was still on the Panthers, I think it would be a little more of that talk rather than the Sam Bennett talk. I'm sure somebody will ask Ryan Reeves about Sam Bennett. But I mean, with Sam Bennett being day to day,
Yeah,
we
if
don't
he's in
know
the game, we don't even know.
if he's even in the game. That's gonna be a mute point. But yeah, no, it's I am wondering how much of that's going to be like how much are the Panthers really going to try to play that physical style, and how the Leafs are going to try to counteract that. I think it's clear though who you on the Panthers you need to keep an eye on though.
Yes, yeah, that would be one. Matthew Kachuk is definitely the guy to keep an eye on. But like, keep in mind, man, like this is a fast team. We saw that last
Mhm.
year in the playoffs. Very fast team. They're physical and they get on you, especially on the forecheck. And that's kind of been an issue. Speed has been an issue for the Maple Leafs early on in the year. We'll see if the changes that they've made to the lineup can try and help slow some of these teams down and potentially that could be a good recipe for success. I'll be curious to see if that's the case tonight. But looks like in goal is not going to be Joseph Waldo. It's going to be Ilya Samsonov. Did you think that was the right call to go back to Sammy here in Florida?
I would have given Joseph Woll that start. I think.
Why? I'm curious.
Well, I think he played well on Monday, and you should give him another chance after he played well.
But
But
he's
the
the
other reason,
backup. He's the backup,
I know
though.
he's the
Isn't
back.
like
The other reason too, though, let him get a little bit of retribution against the Panthers, right? Because like that lasting image of Radical Gudis screaming in his face as he lost that game in overtime. Like, I wonder how much I don't like. Joseph Wall seems to be the guy that doesn't get phased by those things, but
yeah.
personally, I'd like to see him get a chance to overcome that, right, and get a chance for a little bit of retribution. But that being said, yes, Samsonov is the starter. You got to go back to your starter when you play your backup. But it's not like Joseph Wall played bad, right?
No, he didn't. And look, I think Wall so far in his lone game has played better than Samsonov did in the
Yeah.
2 games that he'd played. But ultimately, like this guy's your starter. I think the Maple Leafs got to get this guy going. And okay, playing him against a team that went to the Stanley Cup a year ago, maybe that's not the best way to get him going. But either way, you got to play him in games, and he's got to get back in the right mindset. Because when this guy's on his game, he was a top 10 goaltender last year, and the Leafs kind of need that, especially if their defense is going to be as leaky as it has been this season. They're going to need that guy to get back to being the player he was a season ago. And in order to do that, he's got to get into games. He's got to get his confidence back. Like I appreciate the narrative where it's like, oh, Joseph Wall, give him, an opportunity to get his revenge after getting yelled. Ultimately, I don't think Wall cared that he got yelled at in the face. Dave's so mad he's leaving here. I don't know, man. I really don't think that Joseph Wall or that Samsonov should be sitting out many games here. I think they got to try and get his game dialed in as much as possible. So I think they made the right call by going to Sammy.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, he's the starter. You play the starter. I do think that Joseph Woll deserved another start just based on even by play alone. You can take out the narrative of playing the Panthers. But hey, if Samsonov doesn't have a good game, then I think you can start to have a little bit of the conversation of giving Woll
Sure.
more starts if he deserves them.
Sure. Yeah. I think if it's a third time, it's not third time you're out, but it's like it's 3 tough starts in a row, Sammy. Your leash ain't that long, pal. I know Matt Murray's not pushing you, but this kid's pretty good too. And if it turns out to be a Jack Campbell, Stu Skinner situation where the young cat ends up, becoming the main guy, maybe that is what ends up happening. But Sammy's going to get the start between the pipes, and I think we're all hoping that he has a good bounce back performance after not looking so great in his first couple of games. All right, Dave, what's your the 3 keys to victory tonight for the Maple Leafs?
I think defensively, you got to look out for still a really good Panthers offense. Like, you look at this team, Evan Rodriguez, I know he's bounced around with many teams, but he's still a really good producer at the NHL level when he's given those opportunities, which he is in Florida. Kachuk, Reinhart, Barkov, Verhaeghe, like, they got guys who can score, and they got speed, as you mentioned. Like, so I think the Leafs are going to have to really account for that in this game.
Yeah, absolutely. That to me is going to be something. They got to limit the speed of the Panthers through the neutral zone, through the forecheck. And a way to do that to limit speed to me is to limit the turnovers. They've been a very sloppy team so far. Sheldon Keefe called out his top players after the game against Chicago. Just really sloppy play all around from those guys, particularly in the offensive end. But anytime you cough up the puck in the O zone, puck's going the other way. And if you're not, ready to go, that's kind of how this team's been, been victimized so far early in the season. So I think let's clean up the turnovers, and that should put a bit of a halt to these transition goals that they've been scored on. So that's another key for me.
Yeah, it's more so learning from what went wrong. And that was going to be actually my second key, which learn what you did wrong against the Panthers in the playoffs, which was turnovers and just untimely mistakes that went into the back of your net, right? It wasn't that the Panthers were dominating the Leafs in those games. It was you made a bad mistake, you made a bad pinch, you decide to flip it back into your zone and get it intercepted, or you blew a tire behind the net. Like things like that, the Panthers are ready to pounce on them, pun intended. Like this Panthers team feasts on mistakes, and the Leafs can't afford to make those mistakes.
They sure do. And I'm going to show what the Panthers blue line currently looks right now. And I mean, the Maple Leafs should be able to do some damage here against this blue line. Like, Oliver Ekman-Larsson, great player 5 years ago. He's got like a 23% expected goals through the first couple of games. And you noted it. They're missing Aaron Ekblad. They're missing Brandon Montour, who are their two best defensemen. And, guys like Uvis Balnisks. I've never heard of this guy in my life. You ever heard of this guy in your life? I haven't. And now he's going to be out there playing against the Maple Leafs and Mikola Kulikov. Like there's a lot of not some big names here on the Panthers blue line right now. So hopefully Toronto can find a way to capitalize and put some pucks in the back of the net and keep them out of theirs. Ultimately, like it's the simplest key to the game, but maybe try keeping the puck out of your own net and score more goals than the opposition. Like that's the key to any game ultimately. But after what we just saw happen and after the last couple of games, it's like, yeah, that might be a good idea. And buckling down defensively will go a long way for that because these goalies, they really haven't had a lot of help either so far this year. So I think those definitely are going to be some important keys for tonight's game. Any other comments you want to make before we duck out of here for the day, Dave?
Well, I mean, when you look back at the Chicago game, I think one thing offensively, this team's got to find a way to get into the slot, right? They got to get those slot opportunities. Look at the shot that Tavares scored his goal on. Open in the slot, rip the past the goalie.
The thing is, like, I felt they got into the slot. It was just connecting on the passes.
Yeah.
That wasn't like they worked themselves in there, split the couple times, but they just got to crispen it up and actually connect on those passes and those, make some plays once they get there. I think that's more so what this team has to do.
Yeah, they just got to be more assertive offensively and crisp, as you said. Like, but don't try to be too fine and too perfect. It's not the worst thing to put a puck on net and get a rebound, right? You don't necessarily always have to make the perfect pass because it's not always going to be there.
Yep. Totally agree, buddy. All right, should be a fun game. Excited for it. Puck drop. We got 7:00 puck drop tonight, 7 or 7:30. One of the two. When it's in Florida, sometimes it changes times.
It is a 7:00 puck drop.
7:00 puck drop. All right, good stuff. Hopefully they can get that revenge on the team that eliminated them, and I think we see a tussle. You think we see another tussle? 3 games, 3 fights. We going 4 for 4? What do you think?
I'm gonna say no.
No,
Unless someone takes liberties in this game, I don't think Reeves is gonna go out there and look for a fight. I think something has to happen. I think this time around, unless he does something to get the Panthers riled up. I don't even really know who would fight Ryan Reeves on the Panthers. Like who's there? Because they ain't gonna be Kachuk. I'll tell you that much.
No. There'll probably be some wrestling by Matty Kachuk, I would imagine, but maybe not physical gloves touching the ice. But
Yeah.
hey, we'll see. Should be a fun game. Should be a good one. And can't wait to watch it. But that'll do it for us here today on the podcast. I'd like to thank you all for listening and supporting the show. You can subscribe to the Locked On Leafs podcast on all podcast platforms and receive daily Leafs content. Follow myself on Twitter at Mickey_Canuck. Follow Dave at D_Morassutti, and follow the show as well at Locked On Leafs. We're also up on YouTube, so you can go ahead, smash that like button if you enjoyed this video. Leave a comment down below your thoughts on the line changes that Sheldon Keefe has made, and if you think it'll work. All right. We'll be back at it with another episode for y'all tomorrow to recap tonight's game between the Leafs and the Panthers. Go Leafs, go. Until then, keep locked right here on Locked On Leafs.